One of the most frustrating things for students on test day is dealing with the immense amount of 50-50 questions that the AMC is putting on the exam. So why does the AMC actually bother to put so many 50-50 questions in? Well, there's a very simple explanation. Basically, they want students to get into what we call time depth. And if this sounds a little complex, don't worry. This basically just means they want students to be behind on test day or not be in an optimal time-paced environment for the exam and the section that they're in. So for example, let's say that typically at around 40 to 45 minutes in Chem Phys or Bio, you're roughly close to halfway done or near that mark. Well, if you've only finished 2 or 3 passages, you're in a time depth, meaning you're running behind where you should be on the exam. And the reason why 50-50s are really good for this is because they induce you psychologically to spend a lot more time than you want to. For example, let's take a look at a theoretical question. In this question, let's say you spent about 1:30 and it's some super complicated physics concept that you just can't get. At the end of 1:30, you're sitting there with 4 answers left and you have no idea which one is going to be the correct one. So right now, your chances of guessing the correct answer are just 1 out of 4, basic statistics. But what if you had the same question, but you were able to eliminate one of the answer choices? Now your odds of getting this question correct are actually 1 out of 3. They're much better than 1 out of 4. And now you're thinking, what if I spent a little bit more time on this question? I might be able to get it. And now think about that if you can eliminate a single other answer. For example, let's say you got to the same question, same concepts, but for some reason, you were able to eliminate 2 of the answer choices. Now you're in a situation where you're in a 50-50 game. You have a 50% chance of getting this answer correct. This is where students get into a ton of trouble because the unfortunate thing with most of the questions in sections 1, 3, and 4, which are the heavily content-based sections, is that if you don't know the content and you've spent approximately 1:30 or more on the question itself, the chance of you magically remembering the material or deciphering the passage or finding out what's missing gets decreasingly likely as time goes on. But in this situation, regardless of what the reality is, you're going to be much more convinced to spend time on this question because you have a 50% chance of getting it correct. On the off chance that you just remember some small fact from your memory or find some detail in the passage that helps support one answer over the other, this seems like a very good place to invest your time in, despite the fact that it's probably not going to lead you to a correct answer, especially if you've already been sitting on this question for 1:30 or longer. AAMC knows this concept very well, and that's why they stack the test with an increasing number of 50-50 questions in order to increase your time depth as much as possible. So why does this time depth actually matter, and how does it hurt us in the long run? Well, let's think about it this way. Let's say you have an easy question. You could finish this easy question in about 45 seconds, and you would get the correct answer most of the time. Well, what if you didn't have 45 seconds? What if you only had 30 seconds? In this situation, the difficulty of the question hasn't changed, but your amount of time available to solve it has. And this is a big issue because easy questions are only easy when you have enough time to solve them. If you're rushed or if you're in a time depth and don't have enough time to appropriately distribute the time resources that you have to each question therefore becomes much more difficult than it should be. And remember, easy questions might take 45 seconds to answer on average, but a medium question can take anywhere from 1 minute to 1:30, and hard questions, of course, anywhere from 1 minute to 2 minutes. So it's really, really tough on students when they get into a time depth because it basically increases the average difficulty of every question regardless of how actually difficult it is for you. And the easiest way to conceptualize that is think about a simple physics question that would be relatively easy if you had like 45 seconds to 1 minute to solve it because it has a lot of steps and different conversions. But you would not be able to do that same question within 15 or 20 seconds. that would make you more prone to making mistakes and losing points in the long run. We heavily discussed the concept of timing and test strategy in our free timing and test strategy course, but the one takeaway we really want students to walk away from this lesson with is that set reasonable time limits. Regardless of how good a question looks, regardless of whether you think it's a true 50-50 or not, if you've already eclipsed the 1 minute 30 mark, which we find to be a very good average metric for most questions on sections 1, 3, and 4, and you still haven't found a good answer or are no closer to finding a good answer, just cut it, pick your best guess, and move on, because you want to conserve as much of that time as you can to eliminate the time depth and actually put yourself ahead of the exam. Remember, if you have time at the end of the exam that you've built up, you can always come back to these questions that you had difficulty with and spend more time on them. But you can't get back time you've already spent. So make sure you keep that in mind, and we hope this helps. Alright, that was a complicated lesson. If you still need help, check out our full-length blog post that we linked in the video description, explore more of our YouTube channel, or just head on over to MCATsavior.com where you can get all of our strategy courses for free.